This is Rock and Roll English. Real people, real English. Here's your host, Martin Johnston.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll English, episode number 271, baby. Oh yeah. In today's episode, we are continuing with the episodes with other podcasters, YouTubers, and today we have an absolute belter, okay? I've used this term a few times to say a fantastic episode, and this really is a fantastic episode because we speak to Alastair from English Learning for Curious Minds, okay? He has a fantastic podcast that obviously as well helps people learn English, and he does episodes, or he makes episodes about weird and wonderful things, okay? And he has lots of strange facts on the episodes, so today we have a look at some of them. But the thing I found most interesting is the fact that we look at the stories as well, so not just a fact, but the stories. And you know, Rock and Roll English is all about stories. So enjoy these stories. I know I certainly did, and I will talk to you again at the end. But in the meantime, happy listening. Hello, Alastair, and welcome to Rock and Roll English.
Hi, Martin. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Great to have you. I came across you actually the other day where I was looking for research about how podcasts can help with your speaking, and I saw a fantastic article that you wrote saying how podcasts help you to speak another language and the science to back it up. And I thought, wow, this man, I need to contact him. He is my kind of guy.
Excellent. I'm thrilled you found that article. I'm a huge advocate, a huge fan of how podcasts can help people learn languages, and there's just, they can be used in so many different ways. So I'm glad that you found that out, I'll be very happy to share that article with anyone who's interested in reading it.
Yep, definitely going to have that in the show notes. So you obviously have a podcast as well called Leonardo English, and it says English Learning for Curious Minds. And immediately I saw that and I was like, oh, wow. I think everyone likes to say they have a curious mind, don't they? So I kind of thought, wow, this looks interesting. Had a look as well, and it said a new episode about a weird and wonderful subject. So all of the episodes are about things that are weird and wonderful. And I thought, this guy is rock and roll. He has to come on the podcast. So I saw you've got lots of different episodes about lots of different things, all weird and wonderful subjects. So we've got some facts to talk about today. Well, you've got some facts for us, haven't you, Alastair?
I do, yes. You said, can you share some interesting nuggets of information, some fun facts from some of your episodes? So I've gone back through the catalogue of episodes. I've actually got a few categories of kind of different facts or interesting things that I thought might appeal to the listeners of Rock and Roll English, given what you told me about them. So I can tell you the categories actually, and maybe we can have a game where you kind of pick a fact from a category. So I've got one. My first category, which I think we should start with, is on rock and roll.
Okay. Wow.
I've got a category on kind of Britain, because I guess people who are listening to this podcast are probably interested in British history and kind of weird things about Britain. There's also one in there about poo, which I hear features quite a lot on this podcast.
It does.
There's a category on Italy, or in fact Britain and Italy, because I know we both have an Italian connection. And there's a category on clothes, because I just finished researching a series on fashion, and another category on just kind of general weird and fun facts. So there you go. Those are my categories of things we can talk about.
They sound like some pretty good categories. I'm looking forward to this because I love a good fact. And I mean, I've got about 3 good facts that I like to share. And when I do, and then people say like, oh, wow, I kind of walk away thinking I'm Einstein kind of thing. So hopefully today is going to give me a few more to add to my 3. So what was the one you said we should start with? Which category?
I guess rock and roll, given this is rock and roll English.
Okay, let's go.
So
let's go.
Let me start with a question for you then, Martin. If I say the phrase "fool's gold" to you, what do you think about?
I think of a band called the Stone Roses.
Okay, so that is the connection that most people make, and in fact that was the connection I first made until I googled it again this morning and realised that One Direction apparently also have a song called "Fool's Gold." Anyway, wow. Perhaps that shows our age. But what I wanted to talk to you about was "Fool's Gold" and Elvis. So your listeners may know that. Another name for Elvis Presley was the king of rock and roll, and he had a famously bad diet. Right, he loved junk food, mm-hmm. and one thing in particular he loved was something called Fool's Gold loaf, and this is a sandwich, and I'm going to describe what goes into the sandwich. It is a big loaf of bread, hollowed out in the middle, so they make a hole in the middle. And in it, they put 1 jar of creamy peanut butter.
One whole jar?
1 whole jar, yeah. So that's whatever it is, 400 grams or something. 1 jar of jam, of jelly, and a pound, so it's about half a kilo of bacon.
Sorry, and he ate this... That's a sandwich for one person to eat this like loaf of bread with 1 jar of peanut butter, like jelly and all of this. He ate that himself.
Indeed, it's 8,000 calories, which I think the daily allowance, the daily recommended amount for a grown man is 2,500 or something. But not only that, he discovered this sandwich, which was kind of created in a restaurant in Colorado. And there's one story about him getting hungry in the middle of the night and chartering his private jet and going with a few friends all the way to Colorado. It's about a 2-hour flight just to get one of these sandwiches. And apparently they were there drinking Perrier and champagne. They bought 30 of these sandwiches and then flew back in the morning.
I mean, when you get hungry in the night, I mean, luckily this doesn't happen to me because, you know, if I wake up in the night, for me, it's like I need to go to the toilet. But my tactic is go back to sleep. And then because the toilet seems like 1 million miles away, like in the night. So I think go back to sleep. Like the idea of thinking I'm hungry and, you know, if that were to happen to me, I would think like, oh, like go downstairs, like make something. That's a lot of energy. But to take a 2-hour flight, I mean, even if it's like your private jet or whatever it is, that's a lot of effort to go to get a sandwich, isn't it? You really want that sandwich.
I mean, I guess this is just an example of how much Elvis loved junk food, and yes, he really loved the Fool's Gold loaf, and he went a long way to get
it. So I mean, I often feel bad and think if I'm eating some like food which is not so good, I think well, maybe my diet's not so good. And I've always actually thought of Elvis and thought, you know, he died when he was not so old, so maybe this will happen to me. But this story's actually made me feel a bit better because I don't go anywhere near those levels of junk food. Like,
yeah,
my idea of a junk food was like last night I had a pizza. Not putting a jar of peanut butter in a loaf of bread and eating it.
Yeah, I think an 8,000 calorie sandwich in one sitting is a swift route to an early grave.
Absolutely. Wow. Okay, so we've got the rock and roll one covered. I mean, I'm going to have to ask you straight away, as soon as you said it, I mean, you listed different categories, but the one that jumped into my mind was poo. I just thought we have to go to this because we might not have time for all of them, but we have to find the time for the poo category.
Okay. All right. So The one that's in the poo category is about something called the Great Stink. Now, for
perfect name for poo, yeah.
For your listeners who don't know what stink means, it's like a really bad smell. And this refers to a time in London in July and August of 1858, so about 150 years ago. Essentially where the Thames River, so the big river that runs through the middle of London, was so filled up with essentially like human excrements and sewage, and it combined with a heat wave. So about this time of year, 150, whatever it was, 160 something years ago, 164 years ago, combined with a heat wave, where the temperatures got up to 35 degrees in the shade, 50 degrees in the sun, and
50 degrees in England.
Yeah, like a massive heat wave.
Wow.
And the essentially the whole of the Thames was so blocked up with like human excrements, poo essentially, and waste from an entire city, that the whole thing just blocked. And
the river just blocked because it was just full of poo.
The river just completely blocked, and the smell was so bad that people had to leave the city. There's a story of of Queen Victoria and her husband Prince Albert trying to go down the Thames while this was happening on like a pleasure cruise, and she took a bouquet of flowers to hold under her nose to try and kind of stop the smell, but it was so bad they went for a couple of minutes and had to turn around. So yeah,
abandon ship. The poo's too much. Let's go.
Exactly. The one sort of I guess bit of good news from this story is it made the City of London really rethink how sewers were dealt with, and so London's got a pretty amazing sewer network now, and that all comes from after this great stink of 1858.
The Great Stink, like you hear of these, the Great Depression, of things like this, but the Great Stink, and it changed London.
Exactly,
it changed the city.
Yeah, and so you kind of, I guess it's hard for us to imagine now, because even though people might complain that London might be a bit smelly with cars or certain parts that don't smell so nice, it's absolutely nothing compared to this Great Stink.
Yeah, I mean, and just in case anyone's ever thinking of jumping in the river, don't basically. Yeah. Fantastic. Wow. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure though if I'll be using that one at the party. Maybe after a few drinks when I'm drunk, then I'll be bringing that fact out.
That's probably, yeah.
Exactly. I don't want to go straight in with that fact. So okay, one that maybe I could go straight in with is you said something about Britain, like British history. I mean, I suppose the Great Stink is also part of British history, although I don't remember studying that in school.
Yeah.
But tell us something else about British history then.
Well, one fun story that I think is a super interesting idea is how people in Britain got so obsessed with tea, right? Okay. And I guess if you asked lots of people in Britain what the national drink was of the country, people would say a cup of tea. Like people in Britain drink a lot of tea. And there's a fun story about when Britain was basically trying to find out how tea was produced in China, and there was a Scotsman called Robert Fortune, who actually managed to disguise himself as a Chinese peasant. I'm not quite sure exactly how that happened. Okay. Obviously, there are no pictures from this time, but apparently he got away with it. Traveled deep into China to try and observe how tea was actually made, and managed to escape. He had the discovery that green tea and black tea aren't actually two completely different plants. They're just treated in a different way. And essentially that was one of the ways in which tea was kind of stolen from China.
So we sent a tea spy to China to find out.
I'm not sure if he was a kind of James Bond style official T spy, but he was certainly a man who knew that kind of finding out as much as he could do about tea would be a beneficial thing, and yeah, he managed to do it. I still can't quite believe that he managed to blend in with all of the other Chinese peasants, being presumably a Scottish looking man, but apparently he did, and it worked.
Whatever he was using for a disguise, what a great impact he's had as well. Then,
indeed, yeah, it's a fun one.
Yeah,
I've got another one about well, actually, I guess it's not a sort of fun fact, but it's a sort of something related to learning English / using English and Britain.
Okay.
And this is actually from George Orwell, who your listeners might know as the author of books like Animal Farm and 1984.
1984, the year I was born. That's why I always say it was the greatest year, because there's a book that is named 1984. So it's a great year all round, really.
Yeah, unless you're a character in the book.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
yeah. But George Orwell was also a famous journalist and author, and he had 6 rules for effective writing in English, which I thought could be a fun thing just to share with people. So I kind of go through them quite quickly, because there are 6 of them. The first one is to never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print, basically because people just copy what other journalists write, and he thinks that's a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Never use a long word where a short one will do, which is probably...
I totally agree with that. I say on the podcast, I only know words that a maximum of 2 syllables.
Yeah, it's probably anyone who's been spending too much time preparing for an IELTS exam is thinking, what? Yeah. But this is what one of the greatest writers in English said. If it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Don't use too many words. Never use the passive when you can use the active.
Absolutely.
Never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent.
Absolutely.
And last one, break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. So be happy to break those rules.
Right.
Shall I move on to some of the Italian ones?
Let's go to an Italian one.
So these are Italian, but these are also related to Britain. So it's a kind of
good combination,
a strange combination.
Just quickly on this thing, because I know your wife is Italian as well. Does she also think you're strange for putting milk in your tea?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Just double checking. Yeah. Same.
Yeah. No, that's it's something that obviously Italians just really don't understand.
No, they don't. Yeah.
I think the greatest offence I've ever caused her actually was on one of our first dates. I made pasta for her. Sorry, actually, other way around. She'd made pasta for me, and I asked her as a joke. I asked her if she had any ketchup. And
Get out.
Yeah, almost that was the end of the relationship. But to underline, that was a joke. Anyway, so let's move on to the Italian / British ones. A fun thing that perhaps your Italian listeners might not even know about Garibaldi is that he was the famous Italian freedom fighter. But after he sort of retired, almost, he actually
retired from fighting for freedom. Just
retired.
That's enough now.
So after the unification of Italy, he would kind of go on tours and stuff. And one of these tours was actually to England, and he was.
I thought you were talking like a tour. Like a singer does like a concert, and he just goes around telling everyone I unified Italy.
Yeah, I think it was a bit like that. Although,
right.
although people kind of knew what he'd done, but he was so popular. There were like mass crowds that would come out to see him in England, and apparently he was also such essentially like a sex icon that people who would work in the hotels that he would stay in, they bottle his dirty bath water. So the water he'd used to have that bath, they put it in a bottle, and they would sell that because he was such an icon. And so we think of this kind of cult of celebrity being a modern thing, but it was certainly alive and well in 1864 with Garibaldi coming to London.
That is absolutely brilliant. And now I know what I need to do to become a sex icon. I just need to unify. Maybe if I could unify like England, Scotland, Wales into one country, then maybe I can be a sex icon as well. It's not too late for me.
Like the United Kingdom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but just have it in one country, though.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or maybe I could unify Europe, make that one country. There are options, Alastair. Options available to me.
Yeah, and once the unification is complete, you'll have plenty of people selling your bathwater.
Exactly. That is a dream.
Nice. I've got another one about in fact two more that are kind of Italian slash British. So your listeners may know about a Great Fire of London. So there was a Great Stink of London. There was also the Great Fire of London in 1666, where large parts of the old city were destroyed. And one of the major sources of information that exists about this is through a diarist, a writer called Samuel Pepys, and he was woken up by one of his servants to say, "There's a fire, you got to leave," and he took lots of his belongings with him, but some he buried in his garden. One fun thing that he buried in his garden, he put his wine. He puts, he wrote, so I'm just quoting what he wrote. He said, "I did dig another hole and put our wine in it," and he put his Parmesan cheese in it.
Emergency stuff, yeah.
Emergency stuff. So a kind of fun thing that Parmesan was such a delicacy, such a hugely valuable thing in the 17th century in England, that was the one thing that he thought, right, if everything's burning down, I've got to save my Parmesan cheese.
This could wipe out all of the country.
Yeah.
I could have to start a new world kind of thing. What do I need? Well, I've got a bottle of wine and some Parmesan cheese. So
exactly.
Then we'll just go from there, really.
Life is complete. Actually, the second, the other fact on Italy isn't as fun. So I've got some more that I can tell you about. I can tell you one about KFC in Japan. I can tell you one about...
We've got some Japanese listeners, so KFC in Japan sounds great.
Okay, this is probably something that Japanese listeners might know about, but it's kind of a fun fact about like food in Japan. Christmas Day, the 25th of December, is not a national holiday in Japan, but kind of miraculously, KFC, the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the fast foods retailer, has managed to turn basically kind of like steal Christmas almost, and turn that into a sort of national holiday for KFC. So this apparently started with a marketing campaign in 1974 called, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but let me try, Kurisumasu Niwa Kentucky. Which
sounded good to me.
which apparently means Kentucky for Christmas. And this all comes from when there's a group of foreigners who were trying to find turkey in Japan for Christmas, but couldn't find it. And KFC kind of seized on this opportunity to say, what you do to kind of participate in this culture of Christmas, if you're in Japan, is you eat KFC. And apparently every year there are big lines out of the door with people going to eat KFC on Christmas Day in Japan. And it's to this day it's one of the most profitable days for KFC in Japan.
Whoever was in charge of that marketing campaign really earned his money then, didn't he, or her?
I think that they certainly did. Yeah. So that's a fun one. Do you want to hear something about the most prolific art thief of all time?
Okay, this is actually going to have to be our last one because I need to go, but I definitely want to hear about a prolific art thief.
So this is kind of, it's I guess like a fun but also a sad story.
Okay.
So when at least when I think of what would the world's most dangerous art thief be, perhaps you think of criminal gangs kind of bursting into art galleries, like machine guns or that kind of stuff. But there's actually a French guy called Stéphane Breitweiser who, over the course of 6 years, he stole almost €1 billion worth of art from galleries all over Europe. And the kind of strange thing for me is that he didn't sell any of it. He just kept it. He was a bit like a magpie, right? Those birds that kind of collect shiny things, and he wanted to just collect as much valuable art as possible. And he would go kind of almost every weekend. Like you might go to the park, or go to the beach, or do something else. He would go to a museum and
steal stuff.
And just steal stuff, yeah. And he had this kind of room. He lived with his mother, and so it's kind of it's just a strange thing to think that you have a kind of mother living with her, I think 30-year-old son or so, and everyone thinks that he's sort of out of work and wishes that he was going to do something with his life, and he's got this secret room with over €1 billion of valuable art just kind of sitting there. So it's a really funny, kind of sad and kind of strange story. And
his mum, I can imagine just saying like, what have you got in that room? Oh, nothing. Don't worry, mum. Nothing. Don't worry.
Well, the sort of the end of the story really is that he was captured, and when they found out that he when they kind of started to put two and two together and figure actually he might not have just stolen from this one museum, maybe he's responsible for all these other ones. By the time they got to searching his house, his mum had got to his bedroom and she'd thrown everything out. She destroyed a lot of this this priceless art. So she was actually sent to prison too, if I recall correctly.
God.
Yeah. And he's what I think we'd call a kleptomaniac. Like he just can't stop, because he was sent to prison and he came out and he was caught again, and I think he was sent back, and I think he's been caught again stealing. So I think for him stealing art is just a way of life.
Yeah, a way of life. Not recommended, but
certainly not recommended.
A way of life. I hope his mum is free now, because I kind of feel sorry for her getting kind of caught up in this.
I think she is free.
Right.
Yes.
She's not stealing.
No.
Or throwing art out the window. Maybe she just goes to museums and just starts throwing it out the window.
Yeah, I think she's thrown all of the art she can out of the window, and yeah,
there's only so much you can throw out the window, isn't there? You get to a point where it's just too much.
You've done €1 billion worth, and there's none left.
Absolutely. Well, Alistair, I mean, this has been absolutely amazing. I definitely am going to be a more interesting person at parties now. Some people might talk to me, but obviously you've got lots more of these on your podcast. So tell people where they can find out more about you.
Sure. So if you are a podcast listener, and I guess if you're listening to this, you are a podcast listener, then you can just search for English Learning for Curious Minds in your podcast app, and you should see it there.
Okay, excellent. So, well, thanks again, Alastair, for coming on and sharing all of these brilliant facts with us, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much, Martin.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that was me talking to Alastair about all weird and wonderful things. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to go and check him out. I will put all of the links to Alastair's stuff in the show notes, which is rockandrollenglish.com/episode 271. And one quick thing about these episodes, remember this is bonus content. This is extra content, okay? Because I almost didn't find someone to make a podcast with this week, but then I felt under a lot of pressure and thought, oh my God, I need to make the podcast. So if there is ever a Monday for these Mondays and there is no podcast, please forgive me, okay? But anyway, so yes, I hope you enjoyed the podcast as much as I did. Remember to go and check out Alastair. I will talk to you all very soon, people, but in the meantime, just keep on rocking, baby.
Thanks so much for listening to Rock and Roll English. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit rockandrollenglish.com and facebook.com/rockandrollenglish. We'll catch you next time.